'Cause every little thing gonna be alright. Singing, don't worry about a thing. 'Cause every little thing gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. You woke up this morning, you smile at the rising sun, singing sweet songs, melodies pure and yet true, singing. This is a barbarian message to you, who and who. I say don't worry about a thing. Don't worry about a thing. I'm a barbarian. Don't worry about it. Well, I like intellectual barbarian better. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. I'm not a team player. I am not a good. I'm a horrible team player, and I'm sorry for anybody who thought that we was on the same team. I'm with nature. Nature doesn't have a team. Nature just is. It just is. There are no teams. I don't want to be on anyone's team. I got what happened? I woke up this morning and I smiled at the rising sun, how Bob said, and three little birds, guess where they were? They were beside my doorstep. And guess what they was doing? They were swinging some sweet songs of melodies that were pure and yet true. And this is nature's message to you. Don't be on a team. Good morning. Good morning. Don't worry. Oh, I got some highlights from the debate. Highlights, very high, very high, very high. What was that fly on Pence's head? Did y'all see that? Somebody, I guess during the debate, Pence had a fly on his head. And they took a picture of it. Poor guy. And someone made a profile for fly on Pence's head. At fly on Pence's head. I didn't even watch the debate. I don't have time for that. I was doing something important. But I did hear something from the previous toddler fight. And that was that he was asked again if he would back white supremacy. I don't know why people are still asking that damn question. And you say it on camera, do you back white supremacy, Proud Boys? They list everything together. Like they like to list the Proud Boys with white supremacy because they're really trying hard to make a group that was started for the guy whose last name was Rat, and they were picking on him in the office. So they created a group called the Proud Boys where they would punch each other and drink beer and trying to get him to go out and hang out with the bunch. That's how the Proud Boys got started. And they're just trying to make it seem like white supremacy. And they say, yeah, but they, I guess later on, they say a guy named Gavin out of New York started it. And later on, the people who like their skin, and I know a whole lot of people who like their skin. I know a whole lot of people who are trying to be supreme. I know a whole lot of people who are doing a lot of things like trying to silence Joe Rogan on Spotify. I know a whole lot of people who think they're supreme. But anyway, some supreme people join the Proud Boys. Proud Boys, I think it's Proud Boys. I don't know. I don't follow this. I don't follow the silly stuff. And they're the ones fighting with Antifa. So I guess they asked him again. They said, "Hey, do you support it? It's white supremacy." And what did he say? How did he answer the question? Which is funny. It's hilarious to me. This brother, he just like to trip himself up. He said, "Yeah, I tell him to hold on and stand by." I had to stop. Hang on, let me show it to you. I showed. Did y'all see it? I had to pause. I said it. He said, "Wait a minute, whoa." They asked him again because he's denounced it. He has denounced it time after time. I'm so tired of that denouncing video. Somebody sent me the denouncing video this morning. He denounced white supremacy, David Duke, all of them. Just put them all up there. And KKK. He denounced all of them. They asked, "Would you do it again?" Because if you watch the left news, they'll never play that video. And he said, "Yeah, I just tell them to hang on and stand by." Well, I tell you what, you cannot make up your kings and lords and their nonsense. Your kings and lords are just ridiculous. Good morning, Christine. How you doing this morning? But I think they did a press conference with him later, and he said it again. "Yeah, I denounce it," and said, "I denounce it. I'm tired of denouncing it. How come you keep asking me to say to denounce it? You don't never play it on the left media. You always keep it on this media." Oh, goodness gracious. It's Friday. Good morning. So there was that. I found it interesting that the Spotify staff are pulling a Dave Chappelle on Joe Rogan. He moved over, took all that big money for doing his podcast on Spotify, and now they're trying to silence him. I guess hundreds or thousands of employees, I don't know how many, might be seven, I have no idea, are saying that they are going to strike unless they get full edit rights to Joe Rogan's videos, what they can delete, edit, change. So they're pulling a Dave Chappelle. Right, they're just pulling a Dave Chappelle, which is funny to me because that kind of, it fits with that whole truth that the oppressor always becomes the oppressed. Those who have dealt with bad times, they want to take the reins, take the power, and abuse somebody right and back. And so they want to abuse him, except for when it happened to Dave Chappelle, they say it was kind of race related. I'm skeptical. I think it had a lot to do with a lot of things. I think the fact that he was young, making millions of dollars, I think it probably could have been a skin thing. I think it also was just he was kind of arrogant. So what was it, like $150 million contract, and they were going to take most of it or something like that. And so he walked. He just said, I'm not going to play the game. They wanted to edit rights. They've been trying to edit his comedy. I think his show at the time was at the Chappelle Show. So he walked. He went to Africa. So it'll be interesting to see what Joe Rogan does. I'm not interested in like this whole political correctness. I think that's a farce, especially if you're in America. If you are living on American privilege, please talk less about other people. Just try not to say nothing, because we are the most privileged big bunch of baby bastard drama-loving drama queens that's ever seen the planet. Just living here is a violation against nature. Just existing. Unless you were in prison or about to go to prison or you're in a cemetery, if you live in America, you're a sellout. You're selling out. That's just, unfortunately, they modeled the society this way. But the oppressed always becomes the oppressor. That's how that goes. Good morning, Christy. What you got? Yes, he could resign and start his own channel, money enough. Yeah, and he wouldn't make as much money, Christine, not initially. But I think the way they put it, there's something, I guess they call them golden shackles. And so if you know, they'll give you gold to shackle you. So the theory is that they knew they were going to do this to him the whole time. They had the silence, like, Joe, he's waking up a lot of people to a lot of things. I think he does a great job. Does he say all the truth all the time? No, I don't think so, because he's alive. If he said all the truth all the time, he'd be dead. The only reason Noam Chomsky's alive because he only says part of the truth. The only reason Chris Hedges is probably alive because they don't put him on TV. That brother said a whole lot. Well, no, because he kind of, he's still on the vote train. Who else is there? There's a whole bunch of, like Snowden, he withheld information. Otherwise, they had to kill him a long time ago. Assange, same thing. 9/11, he holds back. So I don't think anybody tells all the truth all the time. I think we all self-censor. But moving into an era of allowing massive corporations or for us to censor each other, that's a problem. I censor me because I think there are things that I shouldn't be saying to certain audiences, and so I self-censor, and we all do that. So Joe Rogan doing that's not a bad thing, but to have a corporation force him to do that, that's a different world. That's the difference. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. They call them golden shackles. It's just basically, they bring you in, they tempt you with the money, and if you have a bad contract, they own your content and they can edit your content. They give you the gold, and you either choose to sell out or walk away and lose a whole lot of money. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I think this goes all around LGBTQ or transgender, something like that. He interviews a lot of people, which is important. I think he gives a lot of people platforms where they can speak to larger audiences. And we need a heck of a lot more of that. We don't need any less. You start censoring people to the level that the political correctness wants to, this whole world's gonna blow up in a war. There's no question about that. That's where it's always gonna go. When you silence hate speech, it will eventually manifest itself as physical hate. Things don't go away because you put them. I used to do that, Christine. I used to clean up the kitchen. I used to take the, because we had the kitchen mat, and my mother would say, sweep the kitchen. I try to sweep all that dirt under that rug, try to get rid of it. The dirt is still there. Christine, I know you wouldn't believe that, but the dirt is actually still there. And so you can take your broom and you can try to hide and censor and sweep hate speech that you don't like or speech that conflicts with your team all that you want. It's not going to go anywhere. It's still under the mat. You got to address it. You got to deal with it. You got to be a barbarian and deal with it. That's part of why I don't do the team player stuff, because I feel like when you join these groups and these teams, eventually they want to attach the team name to something ridiculous. Actually, we didn't have that much of political correctness. Politicians are quite straightforward. We don't have that much political correctness. Politicians are straightforward. Well, here they are, Chris. I don't know how they are in Belgium. I know that here they're just lawyers. They straightforward. They lie. They're straightforward with the lie. They lie, and they're not going to stop. They're going to keep doing it because that's the job. The job is to lie to the people. You know, they're lawyers. Is to be deceitful for a paycheck. So hopefully politicians elsewhere in the world have some integrity. But the only politicians here within the integrity are the ones at the very bottom or the ones that walk away. Part of why the only one that I even listen to much anymore is Ron Paul. He's not one. He walked away. Or Cynthia McKinney. And she's not one. She walked away as well. You have no other choice. Otherwise, one disappears and nothing important gets said. It becomes a monster if you don't address it, the hate speech. It does, Christine. And usually the shame though is the monster that gets left from us being children and just, I don't want to hear the Rogan speech. I don't want to hear his guests. What that manifests itself into is stuff that this generation doesn't have to deal with. Their kids are going to have to fight the monster. They don't actually have to fight the monster. We're fighting monsters our parents left around or didn't know about. I'd say they didn't know about it. I think we came from strong people. I think our parents and grandparents are a hell of a lot stronger than what we are. And I think they fought every demon that they could. And so we're fighting demons that got away. And the next generation, they're going to be the ones who are going to have to fight the demons that we're scared to fight now. The ones that we don't want to hear from. But that's part of being an adult. In my book is you see a problem and you go deal with it. You got to be that barbarian. I like the word intellectual barbarian. That phrase, because you can't have any fear. You don't want to be on any teams. You want to say what's true, or at least what you know to be true as possible, or what makes some sense, and you fight for that. And a lot of times it means you'll be fighting with the people who look like you, the people you grew up with, the people around you, people in your family, your friends, people at work. But you want to be that barbarian. You don't want to be a team player. You want to be a barbarian being true to self. Things that you know or hold to be true or make a lot of good sense, and stick to that. But also be open-minded to being wrong. Like that's a part of that formula too. Like it's just arrogance if you're just a barbarian and you're just, beating around and you're okay with being wrong. You're just as bad as the fascists and the ones that are fighting the fascists that are fascists. You have to be open-minded to being wrong. Try to be right, but be open-minded to being wrong. And then good things happen. But yeah, it's like the bacteria under the rug in the kitchen, Christine. If you don't actually clean it up, eventually, it's going to become a monster. That bacteria, them viruses and fungi and stuff, because you didn't clean up the kitchen, you spilled the milk, you didn't deal with that neither. It all percolates under that mat where it's nice and warm, moist, and it'll become a monster. End up becoming a cuckoo virus and killing off grandma. Hang on. I think I can fix I'm trying to fix the comments so I can see the first ones that come in. Good morning. Happy Friday. I'm a horrible team player. I'm not a good team player at all. Because anytime a team says something wrong, it's my job to say, no, that's not right. That's wrong. And it's like, oh, gotta get Trump denounced hate speech. He's denounced it so many times. I'm sick of hearing him denouncing it. I don't personally want him denouncing no more. I think if you don't know that he denounces stuff by now, then you are just so far down the ignorant trail, like the bunny trail. I don't even know what to say. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know why it does that. Enhance, resize. I'm trying to see, like I see Coco just posted something down at the bottom. and it's not going to show till another comment shows. So it's like everything's late. We have 11 parties in Belgium, so that's why they speak more up. And that's good, Christine. That's safe. The more parties you have, the better. How many people live in Belgium? How many people? What's the population of Belgium? Say if it's 30 million. If it's 30 million, then to me, there should be 30 million political parties. When you have 30 million, then you'll have total honesty and total truth. But if you have one, you basically have two, because you really don't have much of a choice. You know, it's either this or that, or just one, and that's a useless government. That's just a tyrant. That's a king. You got a minimum, bare minimum is 3. Bare minimum is 3 for human beings to have any say. But you gotta have a government. You can't have a government corporation. Hi Diddy, hi ho neighbors, where's everyone? Christine, we're early. I think we're early, aren't we? We're early and it's Friday. We're early and it's Friday. I think you put those two together, you got a problem. Did y'all see the Corbett? I can show you Corbett. I'll show you Corbett real quick. Corbett. This is on the status topic. Actually, this is right on the status topic. The people who worship the state. His latest video was something about thine Savior, Lord and Savior, state, state government, something. He walked. Did y'all see this? Hang on, I can show this to you. This is hilarious. I only saw a part of it. I was just watching, and what is this called? Church of the Holy State Services. Like, this is where we are. We're in this election season where people are still believing in their cults. I like that meme where someone made it says Cult 2020. It's time to go ahead and get out the cult. It's time to be a barbarian. Make your own God. That Crom. Let Crom be the God.
Is it they? Orbitreport.com. K. Lorem ipsum, etc.
Oh, you know what? I didn't do the whole thing. He was walking up, and he took a few steps and kept hitting himself in the head with the Book of Corbett.
Novus Ordo Seclorum. I owned Dei Ilide. Is it they? Orbitreport.com. K.
Hold on. He has a, what is this called? A homily?
Lorem
Once he steps to the stage.
Ooh,
Church of
good
the Holy
response.
State.
Let us bow our heads in prayer. Our leader, who art in the capital, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom, or other mutually acceptable form of governance, come. Thy will be done in Acapulco as it is in Mexico City. Give us this day our daily food stamps and forgive us our tax arrears, as we forgive the government for putting us into debt. And lead us not into anarchy, but deliver us from freedom. For thine is the democracy, the power, and the glory, until the next election. Amen. Today's hymn will be...
Which is what's about to happen. They're going to go ahead and take away take away more freedoms and bring more debt with that digital dollar. Which is fun because now there are more and more people who are starting to read the Federal Reserve Act, which is good. I have people in my family who are asking for the link. I don't know if they're actually going to read it. We'll see what happens. But that Federal Reserve Act, right? That historical history repeating thing where, okay, these shackles are getting old. They're starting to get a little tattered. Slaves might get away. The fiat currency isn't as strong as it used to be. We don't have as much debt. We got too much debt and the world's not sustainable. So we need to do a reset. And at that time, it was a Great Depression, right? Call on the credit, collapse of society, and give them the new scam, which is the Federal Reserve Act. Now it's something else. Now it's something invisible. At least back then, you could see the Great Depression. The new scheme being used to collapse the global currency to reset and give everybody this digital dollar is completely unseen. But it's history repeating itself. And I was thinking about this. The only way in an information era to get history to repeat itself is to hide it. You have to delete history. You have to cover history up. Because if you have a lot of people who are informed enough and historians as a career, then they're going to look back and say, hey, wait a minute, we're doing what the Third Reich did. This is what it looked like just before the rise of the Third Reich. On all sides, because all sides are statists, the left and the right. They're all statists. They're all statists, you know. And so you have to delete history, otherwise people will call it out. And I think that's why someone sent me a message on Facebook the other day that said that you can't even post a picture of Hitler. Because if you post a picture of Hitler, you can't use his name in any quotes or comments or anything. They're getting rid of history. And the only reason they would get rid of history is the cycle's about to repeat, is they need a new one. They're going to use a new one. They don't want you to go back and look at the tracks of the old. Otherwise, you'll defy the new. And I think that's the same thing with knocking these statues down. The whole knocking the statues down thing is deleting history. They're working on a new slave plantation. So they're getting rid of Robert E. Lee, who was a progressive. Wonderful. Did you hear Jane Fonda Biden is a blessing of God? Jane Fonda Biden? Is that his daughter or something? Well, or are you mean Jane Fonda? Everybody's a blessing from God. Everybody has a purpose. Everybody has a voice, and we should listen to what everybody got to say. But nobody should have a stronger voice than anybody else. There should be no kings, no lords, no leaders, no followers, no masters, nor any slaves. Wonderful. If fam is with you, that's a good thing. A sign everybody wakes up. No, Christine, I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I've known my family long enough to know they're just getting tired of being wrong. I keep telling them, it's like, you got TV facts, man. You have TV facts and TV emotion. Stop texting me the stuff you saw. You saw that on TV? Did you read it? Did you read a book? Did you check history? You know, everything that they say comes from TV, and it's all based in emotions, preconceived ideas, and just being lazy because it's on television or a politician said it. So I think where we are is we're in a place where it's obvious that, okay, yeah, there's something to what Gerard is saying, so we'll look at the Federal Reserve Act. We'll see if they actually read it. They're intelligent people, Christine. I wouldn't say they're waking up. I think that a lot of people are becoming scared because they're realizing that they are going to lose their savings. They're becoming scared because they've been planning for their retirement, and they're starting to maybe consider that their politicians are paid millions of dollars to loot their retirement. I think that's what it is. I think it might be a little bit of greed. I come from a privileged family, Christine. And I think the people with a little bit of money starting to say, well, hang on, wait a minute. So if we keep playing politics and we don't make the digital dollar an issue for the election, whether or not we're going to allow international billionaires to control the currency of our country, you mean to tell me that they could rob my retirement? They could take 80%, they could take 50%, they could take anything they want. If you don't own the price, like mama, you got some money? Yeah, mama, I went out there. I remember I went out and I cut grass, I raked leaves, I cleaned up the toilets at the church, delivered papers. I did all that, Christine. I'm talking to Christine and Coco. Who else is here? People hiding in the wind. You're supposed to greet people when you come in the room, people. I did all of that, and I made money, got my little piggy bank, made my little cash, just a little spare change. And my father one day told me, he said, all right, now give me half. I said, half? Man, you crazy. Man, you crazy. I ain't gonna give you half. And guess what? I was a dependent. That was my father. He could take half if he wanted to. Now, mind you, he was taking the half and saving it for me. He had a rule, a requirement. It was the only way I bought my first car when I was 16, 17, I forgot how old I was, is he made me save half of it. If you control the purse, if there is a sovereign in your house and you are not a sovereign, if mama holds the purse, daddy holds the purse, they can take anything they want at any time they want. And so even if you have a government, they can take it if they want to. You know, which is, we need to reconsider this idea of how much of a government do we really, really want. But when you got international billionaires that own your purse, own your currency, coin your money, and fiat with digital dollars. Oh my God, that they can take anything they want at any time they want. They don't have to save it; they can spend it. Same with my family, and that's a shame, Christine. I love them to death. I don't want them to lose their retirements, but the human race has not learned. Karma is something that if we didn't have karma, we'd be in big trouble. Karma is the only thing that teaches me. I would be an ignorant fool, Christine. Who was that? Diana? Diana's in the house. Good morning, Diana. I'd be an ignorant fool if it weren't for karma. If it weren't for me falling flat on my face, if it weren't for me crashing a car, being stupid, if it weren't for me falling out a tree, if it weren't for me, you know how you get on them swings and you get up to that high swing? You only do it once. You know what I'm talking about? When you get on that swing and you really get the swing, you're like, yeah, your feet are in the air. You just, gravity does not exist. Only once. You only do that one once. I used to swing, I get that thing going, and I almost vertical. I remember you'd go so high when you came back down, you'd feel the pull from the chain against the bar. I did not go to a privileged school. I was privileged. I didn't go to. They had the chain and the metal swings, and it was concrete underneath them or dirt. Or dirt. If it wasn't dirt, it was a mud puddle. It was a puddle of mud, some water. This is before they had all the safe turf and stuff, and so you get up there, because after the rain, the water would pool up in the areas where the kids put their feet from the swing. You only do it once. You get up to the top. Gravity is a great teacher. Thank God for gravity. Gravity gave me some karma. You get up there, get the swinging. Gravity did what it's supposed to do. Christine, I stopped right there, Dan, and I came right there. That was it. Once. Got it. Learn my lesson. Karma is a great teacher. Thank God for karma. We learn by getting hurt. We do. Unfortunately, Christine. And we got to learn that lesson. There's some people who are smart enough who can just read and become a different person. Right? They can read, their mind can process it, and they say, okay, I'm not going to do that. That's stupid. I'm not one of those people. I have to I have to fall off the swing. I have to be the one to fall off the, what's that spinning thing? Where you get on the spinning thing and all your friends push it and it's like, shh, it's like the centrifugal force. You're like in a centrifuge, that little toy that kills kids. And then you let go of the thing and you go flying out that way. Yeah, I'd learned that way too. I wish I was one of those people who could just read something and change. I'm not one. I actually think a lot of people in my family are that way. I think a lot of women are that way. I don't know what it is about men. A lot of us, we got to get them knots on our head. We got to scrub our knees before we realize it.
B, amazing state. Feel free to sing along if you know the words.
Ooh, homilies.
Amazing state, how sweet the rule of our wise Congress.
Wise Congress.
Just pay your tax, you stupid fool, and leave the rest to us.
It's a bad idea to ever trust anybody that made a career as a liar and a cheat. A bad idea to trust in politicians who almost all were lawyers, judges, and those who deceitfully got paychecks for lying and telling part truths. The ones who got great at it. Trust in them. That's a bad idea. And that's what I told my family member. I gave them the digital dollar, the Banking for All Act. And they didn't want to read it because they were like, oh, well, that's not real. Like, they're doing what they did before. It's very real. Well, it's just in bill form. Yeah, but after it's a law, it's a little too late. That's the whole point. It's too late then. Like, you got to talk about reality before they have a police state police and tanks and bombs and a digital dollar behind it and social credit score. Before they got your money, that's when you want to make your mind up. You don't make your mind up after the election, keep playing politics, and they're about to rob you and the white nationalists. And that's what they fight at the end. You gotta fight the white nationalists. Like, they're about to rob them too. They're gonna rob you and rob them at the same time. That's why they have y'all fighting each other. That's why they're playing all this race stuff. Get everybody excited and angry at each other. Oh, look at that. Next line is, I forsake my sovereignty. You know, if you can get two fools fighting each other, you can rob them both blind as hell. And that's what digital currency, well, that's what the fiat currencies were for. Fractional reserve banking and the Federal Reserve Act. It was just to loot the country. It was actually to loot the world, because what they did is they looted the world through looting the country, right? They gave that fractional reserve banking. They put the nation in ignorant debt that they impossible for them, their grandkids and great grandkids to ever pay back. And then now they got a military that they can destroy the world with, and they looted the whole world through that.
I forsake my sovereignty.
Ooh, sovereignty.
And join the party. I lick boots of authority and vote my life to thee.
Goodness, and he can't sing, just how most churches I go to, they could not sing. They couldn't sing at all. It was horrible. All right, let me do this. That's interesting. I'd like to see where Corbett's going with that, but I kind of want to keep moving. We'll put a pause on that. That singing is horrible. It sounds like me. We'll come back to that. Experience is the best to learn, I believe. It is the best teacher, Christine. Eventually we'll have a generation that doesn't have to learn from falling on its face, but we're not there yet. Right now we enjoy falling on our face. Let's see, what was there, something else? Ooh, the Unabomber, that was interesting. Did you guys know the Unabomber predicted all of this? There are a couple things I didn't know about the Unabomber. Unabomber was in the LSD experiments, right? Ted Kaczynski, I think was his name. He was in the LSD experiment, so he was government made. And he murdered a bunch of people. And I don't know if they killed him or put him in prison and he died. I forgot the story. But the point was he was made by the MK Ultra programs. And then he went to school, got a degree, came out, said the robots are going to kill everybody. And he started blowing up a bunch of stuff. And he wrote this big, long manifesto. I want to look at the manifesto. I don't know if that's interesting. But they say he predicted all of this. He predicted all of that the robots were going to take over. And the only way he got caught, which is funny to me, the only way he got caught, it was a phrase that he used to say as a kid. And he put it in his manifesto, and I think his brother tattletaled on him, said, "That's my brother." That reminds me of contact tracing and where we are today. People that turn you in. Ooh, that's what I'm gonna do. No, liquid air battery, that was interesting. I was looking at that as well. The new liquid air batteries, which are fascinating. However, it doesn't really matter because we don't know the level of technology that actually is in the remit of modern technology. It's being banned from us. We don't know what level of technology we actually have.
These are being called the new billion-dollar solar panels.
Okay. Let me see if I can if I can do a quick search for it, because the Unabomber's manifesto, I think it was kind of long. Here we go. Let's see if I can find an audio book. How long is it? The Manifesto by Ted Kaczynski. Good Lord, it's 3 hours. You had that much to say? You don't have to say that much. All you had to do is just say the robot's gonna kill everybody. That's all you had to say. I don't know if I want to show that, Christine. We might be here a minute. Isn't there like a quick reading of it? CNN. Maybe let's see how much CNN will tell. That'll be interesting to see how much they say about it. And then there's somebody else's.
The most dangerous serial bomber in U.S. history. 16 bombs in 17 years.
that we made, that we paid for, our tax dollars made him, got him on LSD. He probably saw the future and came back because LSD and psychedelics trip you out and allow you to tap into other things. Some creature probably told him the technology kills everybody, and the CIA caused all of that through that LSD program, and he probably was trying to warn people. Bad idea with how he tried to warn people with bombs, but we made him. Same thing. And this is like we talked about yesterday, problem, reaction, solution. They created the problem. We reacted to the problem, and the solution was to kill him, but we kept the CIA and we kept all the secrecy and all the LSD and the programs that they had going.
23 injuries and now a third death.
It's very frustrating because you were doing all the things that you thought you should do, and you weren't any closer to solving the case than you had been 2 years previous.
All you had to do was call the CIA and ask them. That's all you had to do.
Then the
everybody that
reached
they trained to see
the
the
press
future
and said, I want to make a deal. And it took this case in an entirely new direction.
Along with the latest bomb, he sent 3 letters. The letter says the bombings are the work of a group that hopes to promote instability in industrial society. The bomber says he will stop if a long article he's written is published in a major U.S. publication.
He made it very clear. If you publish the manifesto in the New York Times or the Washington Post, the Terrorist Group FC will desist from terrorism.
Cases are solved when the subject starts communicating. Anytime you have someone that wants something, they usually give away a little bit of themselves.
The question became, how are we going to take advantage of his offer, if at all? Because at that point in time, the United States had a very specific policy. We did not negotiate with terrorists.
Wait a minute. Now that's interesting to me, because he said all you got to do is publish my manifesto and I'll stop killing your citizens. Why wouldn't they do that? If it's just information. If it's just information and it's wrong, see, now I got to read it. Now I got to I have to go back and read it. If it's 3 hours, I'll do the audiobook. That's a lot. That's a whole lot. But maybe he met with the forest god, the tropical god, the lady in that forest, the aliens, the people from the future, and they told him that the world's going to collapse if we continue to give the world's robots and automation and energy and industrial productivity to corporations. That's interesting. See, I wouldn't have done that. If I were the government and you were saying you were going to kill my people unless I publish your words, I would say, well, I've been telling everybody that you're crazy, and I believe that you're crazy. So I really don't care what you tell them. It's going to sound crazy because you're crazy. Nothing you say is true. It's all false. So we're going to go ahead and we'll publish it. You stop blowing stuff up. And that'd be the end of it. But then I have to catch him. Yeah, I still catch you. We got to get you because you already killed people. But then we had to get the CIA too because the CIA made you. So it's interesting to me now. That hits one of my principles, which is if it's banned from being showed, if it's deleted, if it's a person that keeps going to Facebook prison, then it's somebody I want to spend more time with and know what they know.
The time I was a child, I had this realization that my brother was special.
The bomb was placed inside of a book.
16 bombs in 17 years.
I asked Mom, why is he like this?
And he did the right thing. His brother turned him in. That was the right thing. That was the right thing. You can't let people go killing people. That's the wrong idea. You know, the oppressor becomes the oppressed, right? You can't fight your oppressor with the way they fight you, right? Like Antifa and the Proud Boys, or the right and the left, the Black Panthers and Ku Klux Klan. You know, if you use violence to solve your problems, then you are the problem. You are them. You're just in a different group from them, but you believe in the same thing that they believe in. You believe in rule by force and power. So that's interesting. So I do want to take a, I don't remember too much about the Unabomber. So the fact that he talked about technology and how it destroys the world, he did psychedelics, I find that to be interesting. I'm looking into that a little more. Between 1978 and 1995, he killed 3 people and injured 23 others in an attempt to start a revolution by conducting a nationwide bombing campaign targeting people involved with modern technology. So it sounds like he knows that that's a problem, Citizen Deb, but he took on, there's no point in fighting the United States with the same violence that they have, right? He just wanted the monopoly on violence. You know, so I think saying that he was right is pretty strong. I would say that he knew of an obvious problem. He did not know how to solve that problem. And so he proceeded to do what the United States Incorporated was doing, which is killing people to try to get his point out there, to profit from what he felt should happen. You know, you can't become them or you are them. And then there's nothing for you to fight. He forgot to get the bill. Did I just say that? He forgot to get the bill. Oh, Lord. Citizen Dev, stop it. He's right. Let me see. Would you want to catch Bill Gates' killer? Bill Gates. Well, yes, I would. Because you know what, Citizen Dev, that again hits another thought that I have, a principle that all my friends tend to give me and wise people I spend time with rubbing elbows. If I were born Bill Gates, I'd be Bill Gates, right? If I were born him, I'd be trying to cure everybody too. It would not be a cure. There ain't gonna be no cure, ain't no C, no U, no R, no E, and the thing that you're gonna get. The problem isn't Bill Gates, right? The problem is a system that empowers a Bill Gates. The problem is a system that will censor a president repeating after doctors. It'll censor doctors, it'll censor nurses, but it won't censor Bill Gates. The problem is a system. You know, you have to do what's right. You always got to do what's right, no matter if it doesn't feel good. Citizen Dev. That's my stance on that one. Yeah, of course because killing Bill is not the right. It's not the right answer. Killing anybody is not the right answer. Killing the system, that's the right answer. That's what I think. But you know, that's me. Kind of like us killing hundreds of millions of people. Yes, Miss Tree, and this is why I say if you got American privilege, you know, hold your horses on all the other privilege talk. We got American privilege, and just to exist here means that, you know, our very lives are based on bodies of people all over the world. So, you know, this whole censoring Joe Rogan, or censoring Dave Chappelle, or censoring Donald Trump, or censoring Alex Jones, or censoring the Black Panthers, or censoring the Ku Klux Klan. That's all a mistake. That's all a mistake, and it's all hypocrisy because we are the kingpin censors of the planet. We censor everybody. And they bring a little bit of that blood home and they give us an economy for it. They let us buy cars, live privileged lives, have lattes, unicorn lattes, and they poison everything that we have too. We are king of censor, right? Bolivia, Venezuela, Iraq, Saddam Hussein, Bin Laden, all of them. Anybody says Julian Assange, right? In fact, what's happening with his trial? That's what I want to look up. What's the latest on Julian Assange? Anybody got something? You know, usually RT has the best stuff, and I don't even trust them. I haven't watched them in a long time because I feel like even they are pushing the limits, but if they weren't telling part truths too, and they weren't doing some self-censoring, they wouldn't be being broadcast in the United States Incorporated. I want to see something recent. Because once again, I know people will say, he's CIA! Every time I mention them, CIA! It doesn't really matter. Good people in the CIA too. If I were them, I'd be them. 4 days ago, MSN unanimously decides to cover Assange case. Okay. Oh, that's good. That's good news. John Pilger. Now, I love what John has to say. Assange's crimes are telling the truth and making war criminals look in the mirror. Right. And this is all good stuff. I don't understand why people still don't like him. But not like him. Ignore him and just look at what he did. The Warhawks come home to roost. Assange extradition hearing 5 days ago. I think this is happening every day now. Right? George Galloway reacts to the first presidential meeting. And this whole thing could be controlled opposition too. Like I don't trust nothing. I don't trust nothing I see on this damn television because it all could be a setup. It's possible Assange could be totally bought off. But it's creating this narrative where not one other journalist will ever stand up and tell you anything. If they claim to have the ability to, once again, globally censor every single journalist on the planet, By putting him in prison, you're not going to have any journalists say any damn thing because they're all going to have to be in hiding like Edward Snowden. And although America's not a superpower anymore, that's my belief. I say that. I posted that earlier today. I said, everybody, church, lean over and hug an American next to you. Because I don't know if they don't know, but you're not actually a superpower anymore. You're not at the top of the list. Yeah, you still got tanks and bombs and guns and all of that stuff, but you ain't got the currency to buy the fuel. You don't have the currency to buy the uranium and the depleted shells for the white phosphorus. You don't have none of that. International billionaires own that. Once they devalue your currency, hyperinflation hits, you cannot wage war but for 30 minutes. America is not a superpower anymore, but these powers that we have will move over to Russia. They'll move over to China. They'll move somewhere else. Power doesn't go anywhere. It's just a vacuum. It'll just move from one to the next. And I think that's part of what's happening. Is America's being brought to its knees because international currency manipulators and bankers make the most money when you have equally opposing forces. Right? And when you got one that nobody can take on, you can't make a whole lot of money from that. You can't do a whole lot of robberies with that. It's like Fight Club. If you have a Fight Club and you got the United States and you got a Russia and China, the United States keeps beating the hell out of Russia and China, how much money are you gonna make? At what point in time do you realize that, damn it, this United States fighter's got too much power? It's got too much power. It wins every single bout. Nobody's coming to the fights no more. I can't make a whole lot of money on bets. So we need to bring the United States to its knees a little bit and make it more equal with Russia and China. So I think that's probably what's going on. But then they'll take that global power to censor anybody, anywhere, at any time, doing anything, which is why Russian troops train the United States, which is another interesting factor, and make anybody a Julian Assange. That's why I love John Pilger's perspective. I'm curious as to what he recently said. I'm going to skip to the meat.
Crimes, he forced them to look. Well, if it had been about China or Russia, or
40 NGOs being barred, Pacific going underground with one of the world's greatest journalists and filmmakers, John Pilger, who has been present at the extradition trial of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange that has been taking place at London's Old Bailey. John, thanks for coming back on. Before we get to the testimony, before we get to the Amnesty International, 40 NGOs being barred, the CIA, the burgling of lawyers. If no one knew anything about Julian Assange of WikiLeaks, they might have known about the collateral murder video. They'd have seen soldiers, American soldiers, killing journalists. Why is Julian Assange the one who's at the Old Bailey being tried, not all those people all around the world that whose war crimes he exposed at WikiLeaks?
Well, if it had been about China or Russia or one of the official enemies, that's fine. But this is about us. He gave us too much truth. He made those who committed these war crimes, he forced them to look in the mirror. It's them, it's you. That's his unforgivable crime. That, you see, we don't commit these war crimes. We don't shoot people who are unarmed. We don't gun them down and laugh at them. We don't do all the things that the WikiLeaks video has told us, plus so much else. Our politicians, and in the present circumstances, it's almost a mockery to say so, our politicians don't really lie. I mean, our press tells us the truth. Our media, by and large, a few things wrong with it, but by and large, is...
I think what I'm gonna say on that real quick is it is a positive thing, right? And it did make war criminals look in the mirror, but it also made those who support war crimes look in their mirrors too. It made me look in my mirror because I, for the most part, coming from a military family, I believe the same thing, right? We are the good guys. We are trying to do what's right. We don't shoot unarmed people. We don't bomb kids. We don't do those things. We do our best to avoid innocent populations. And prior to Assange, I would say that I still had a little fragment of belief that we were at least trying to do the right thing. after Assange released all that with WikiLeaks, which, by the way, everyone talks about Assange. It has nothing to do with him. It has to do with WikiLeaks, right? This has to do with what is true. Is what's true allowable in the public domain? And so when Assange released that, and you see that video, the guys laughing, shooting from the helicopter, it didn't bother me what the soldiers did. What bothered me was that it was so indoctrinated and ingrained in them that they would laugh doing it, right? And that's not a thing that kids have in them. That's a thing that they're given through boot camp. That's a thing that they're given through war. That's a thing that they're given through being put in a situation for international billionaires to steal oil and mineral from other people and steal their land. And it made me look in my mirror. I have no interest in looking in the war criminal's mirror. I'm not a war criminal, but damn it, do I sure live in America. And so I'm complicit. So I had to look in my mirror, and that actually is what led me down to, I want to say it might have been, not Noam Chomsky, Chris Hedges. And that led me into like reviewing more legal information, and that led into the Federal Reserve, the from Jekyll Island, and starting to read the laws, and eventually my friends who just kept annoying me with that 1871. Now, why are you talking about 1871, man? Just shut up. This is about the Federal Reserve Act, 1913, 1933. And my friends just kept posting, and they stuck with me. You can go back and see videos of 2 or 3 years ago still, and I was just like, yeah, stop with the 1871, man. And finally I sat down, read the Act of 1871, and I realized, like, wow, we're not even trying to do the right thing, because there's no we in this conversation. There's no us. This is a governing corporation that's owned internationally by billionaires, and they even own the currency, but they don't just own the currency, they own the entire damn corporation, And so Assange got me there. And so I appreciate what John Pilger is saying, in that it forced war criminals to look in the mirror, but we are the ones who prop them up. It's us who need to look in the mirror.
It's a free media. None of these things are true. And Assange represents what I would say is too much truth. It is the most important political trial of this century, certainly one of the most important of my lifetime. And it's been virtually blacked out.
Yep, I agree with that.
By most of the so-called...
It is the most important trial. Because what's on trial isn't Assange. What's on trial is whether or not what's true is allowed in the public domain. So whether he's CIA, MK Ultra, controlled opposition, like, take the tool of what the devil's trying to do and use it for good. Like, how's that scripture go? God meant it for good, but Satan meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. Something like that. What is that? Is it Kempo, where you take your enemy's strength and you use it against them? You take their move and you use their weight against them. You take this situation, and whatever they're trying to play out, we don't let them play it out. Like, to me, when I look at this answers the question of whether or not governments can have secrecy, whether or not you can have wars, whether or not you can have police actions, whatever you want to call it, have secrets, whether or not you can have a DARPA, whether or not you can have these things. You can't have these things and have an honest world.
Mainstream media, no surprise to me, but when you sit in court and listen to some of the truly shocking evidence, indisputable evidence,
nobody's covering it.
Just the day, what I would call the medical day, describing what Assange has gone through with the evidence of Professor Michael Kopelman and Professor Kate Humphreys, both of them distinguished neuropsychiatrists, talking about the way this single human being has been punished for telling this truth. That if he's sent to the United States, if he's extradited, he'll find a way to take his own life.
Well, I want to get to the psychiatric reports in a second, because, of course, the U.S. prosecutors present there at the Old Bailey trial cast doubt on those prominent...
Hang on. I'm processing something. So he said that if he gets extradited to the United States, he's going to kill himself. Why? Well, I get it. I'm not getting extradited to the United States. Y'all ain't putting me nowhere. You got to kill me. Y'all like slavery is a choice. I agree with that from that stance. But I had a thought. What if it is that the suspicions that he didn't tell it all? I personally think that the only reason he's still alive is he didn't tell it all. I think the only reason that Snowden's alive is he didn't tell it all. Because on many levels, Russia and America, which is where Snowden's at, they're allies 100% above the level of the government and within levels of government. They're on the same side. They have the same technologies. I think that damn UFO and the EMG device, which is not a UFO, that's identified, there's a Google patent for it. Russia has them too. I don't think Snowden told the full truth, and I don't think Assange told the full truth. I think that's why they're still alive. I think the United States want him because they want to torture the hell out of him to get him to reveal the rest of his sources. That's what I think. I think that he only told parts of the truth, but they want to know each and every person that had anything to do with letting the American people know what their government has actually been up to. I think that's what he's trying to avoid. I think that's probably why he would kill himself. I mean, yeah, the pain and suffering is one thing, but I think the United States Incorporated, not the United States government, they're two different things. I think the United States Incorporated actually wants to know which one of the slaves treasonously gave him the information, and that'll silence all the other whistleblowers. Like all of this, to a degree, is over. So anybody's got any common damn sense, anybody who reads any scriptures, anybody who believes in any of the 10 Commandments or natural law, they have no interest in what the United States Incorporated is up to. They're a murderous band of bandits that are a mafia that are killing people all over this planet. But they need to silence anybody else from saying anything else. So I think there's a twofold thing. You know, one is, they've got that whole problem reaction solution is to stop any journalists from speaking up again. But then they got to deal with the leaks from within the plantation of slave whistleblowers who act, and they're not even slaves, they're commodities, but them actually speaking up about the projects and the things that they're doing.
Well, yes, they cast out. I've never heard in this modern age when finally we're recognizing the blight of mental illness, how it touches so many of us, and especially during this coronavirus period. The prosecution, QC, attempting to discredit Professor Kopelman's evidence and describe mental illness as malingering. It's like, it's like a Victorian term, as if it didn't happen.
Well, also the prosecutor said that he would be less likely to kill himself. Julian Assange will be less likely to kill himself in a United States prison than at Belmarsh prison in London.
Well, of course, yes. Has he been in a US prison? Supermax, I have. I've interviewed people in them. They were described, I think, by Edward Fitzgerald QC, the defense QC, as a clean hell. And that says it perfectly. They're sanitized, wonderfully sanitized, shining. And they are a vision of a true brave new world. And it's there, as so many witnesses made clear, he'd be subject to something called SAMS. It's an acronym for Special Administrative Measures, in which he'd be dropped in a hole and not seen again.
They said not solitary.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is that they don't put people who rape people, who blow up people, who bomb people, terrorists who actually hurt people, they really don't care too much about. They just put them in a supermax, right? They take activists who actually speak up, whistleblowers who say things, who are really like the real dangerous people, and they put them in the CMUs. They don't put them behind bars. They put them in holes. They put them in holes where they have no contact with a human being and they can't talk to anybody for months. That's that CMU unit we were talking about. So yeah, Julian Assange, he'd go through torture, whatever they need to get the information out of him, and they would just drop him in a hole until he killed himself. That's where you put the people who are very dangerous to the United States Incorporated. The people who are out there just raping and killing their commodity citizen things, they could care less about. They just put those in supermax.
Confinement, and that in fact he would have access to things that he
You
needed.
see, the prosecution's arguing against this was night against day. It was so disingenuous.
Well, they didn't quite say it was a country club, but
it was so pathetic. One rightly should be angry about it, but that's the game they play. Assange, the whole hearing shouldn't have happened. It should have been thrown out. We had evidence on the second last day that Assange had been spied on by a Spanish security company, almost certainly in the pay of the CIA. All his confidential deliberations with his lawyers and doctors had been spied on and recorded. That would be enough to throw it out. In the other famous whistleblower case of Daniel Ellsberg, in 1971, I think it was, and Ellsberg, of course, was one of the witnesses at the Assange trial. It was the fact that Nixon had sent his thugs into Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist's office to try and get some dirt on him. The very thing that the Americans were doing in the Ecuadorian embassy on Assange, that in the Ellsberg trial was enough to throw it. The judge threw it out.
David Morales,
that was the end of it.
that case continues, but David Morales and UC Global claim they were protecting Julian Assange. They were hired by the Ecuadorian government to help him.
Sure, there goes another pig flying over, Afshin.
Describe his average...
Hang on. You know, and this is why it's hard for me to watch this sometimes. There's a difference between an American and a Rotherican. They say the word American because it resonates with that identity and that indoctrinated crap they give us as children. These are not Americans. These are Rothericans. These are Rothschild minions of the United States Incorporated. Americans are poor slobs who live in this country, who have no rights, they can't speak, and they're treated as though they're commodities. The Americans don't have a government. That's why and this is even with John Pilger or anyone else. I guarantee John Pilger knows what the United States Incorporated is. I guarantee he knows what the Act of 1871 is. But once again, everyone self-censors to a degree. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on TV.
Day, Julian Assange's average day.
His average day at the moment, I don't know whether he'll be relieved once this thing is over. He is roused at 5 o'clock in the morning in Belmarsh. He is strip searched. He is shackled. Presumably, he is allowed to shower and have some prison breakfast. He then endures at least an hour and a half in this torturous drive from Belmarsh to the Old Bailey in what his partner, Stella Morris, has described as something like an upright coffin. I've seen it. It's a great white Serco-run truck, of course, and there's a small window at the top. To look out, you have to stand rather precariously. So in this dreadful stop-start traffic, and I've driven it, from Belmarsh to the Central Criminal Court, Assange is taken in this box, this prison, to a court where he he sits in a glass corridor in which is his guard and himself. And the only way he can speak to his lawyers is to get down on his knees. Time and again, I've watched him because where I've been sitting has been looking down on him. He's got down on his knees to speak through a slit in the glass to one of the lawyers at the back, and she writes his message on a post-it. The post-it is then handed through the body of the court to the barristers who are arguing the case against his extradition to an American hellhole. That's how he communicates with his lawyers. It's actually slightly better than what it was at Westminster Magistrates Court, where he's actually in a glass cage. He's now in a glass corridor.
Serco would deny it's a coffin and that they carry out their privatized, outsourced British government justice duties all brilliantly. Do you think that's the reason why Judge or Magistrate Vanessa Baraitser didn't want Amnesty International or Reporters Without Borders present? I mean, why were they not allowed? And they've been tweeting furiously, Reporters Without Borders and Amnesty International.
I mean, it's good to see both those organisations at last speaking up. Too many organisations, and I'm not necessarily pointing the finger at both of them, but Assange should have been a prisoner of conscience along with Chelsea Manning a long time ago. It's good to see them protesting at this outrage that they weren't allowed in the court.
Well, Rebecca Vincent of Reporters Without Borders went so far as to tweet against a BBC journalist, arguably.
Well,
a BBC journalist said, you see, the reason why viewers may have to watch Going Underground to hear about this, and not the BBC court report daily from this trial of the century, as people have been calling it, is it was a bit repetitive.
You know, the inanity and the cynicism in that statement, repetitive, every day, has been a description usually of hell, of the kind of hell that WikiLeaks exposed, the kind of hell to which all of us have a right to know, which is now being imposed on the truth teller himself. And for that BBC journalist to describe it as repetitive doesn't quite leave me speechless, but it leaves me with a sense that it's over with much of the media to watch this day after day, this extraordinary, important trial telling us so much about how those who govern us, those who want to control our lives, and what they do to other countries, how they lie to us. Watch this day after day and see none of it reported, or if you do see it reported, you'll see something like Assange told to pipe down by the judge on a day, and he only did this 2 or 3 times. I don't know how he kept his mouth shut, where he stood up and protested at evidence that was clearly false and offensive to him. That was the headline. That was.
So it was interesting to me. It was just kind of got me with what he said is that it's over. It's already over. What journalist now is gonna honestly stand up to a United States Incorporated or a British Incorporated or a Canada Incorporated? Who is gonna stand up to the world? If the world's global elite will put you on trial and torture you for years in a trial before they either find you guilty or not guilty, they torture you more and they throw you in a hole in a CMU, or they let you go free, what journalist is going to do that? What journalist is going to say what's true? Like, I guarantee 90% of already journalists are already done. They've already said, they're not saying anything, right? Whether it be CBS, ABC, BBC, NBC, whatever, they're not covering it just because they're scared. They're already done. I mean, the networks are scared, even outside the journalists. Why would you say the truth and these people are willing to go to this length to torture you? And people aren't going to give up their freedom for that. Yeah, it's a little sensationalized, perhaps, but it's easy for me to say that, though, because I don't sit in a cage, right? I don't sit in a cage and I don't eat prison food. I try to put myself in everybody's shoes, and when I do that, it profoundly speaks to the length they'll go to stop citizens from actually finding out what their government's up to. And to me, that's huge. That's huge. That's huge. I mean, that's what all this is about. Nothing to do with Assange. This has to do with you had someone who actually defied the world's billionaires and had the audacity to share with the slave-like citizens around the world what their governments were actually doing. It's one boggles my mind every day why anybody would vote for this crap. Why anybody would vote for anybody that hardcore evil. Didn't they prove that nothing he released got anybody killed? There's no treason. He is the only untreasonous one in the conversation. Assange. He actually told the people what was true. And it's the government that's been lying the whole damn time. He's the one that's fighting for the troops. He's the one who's saying support the troops, because he's saying these wars are a lie. Not only that, you're making children into psychopaths for looting other countries. That has nothing to do with the defense of America. You know? Why anybody would still vote for this is insane beyond me. All right. Slow torture is harder, than quick murder to endure. Yeah, slow torture is really where it's at, Lori. You know, and letting the world's journalists see it play out. The deed is already done. The silence is already there. The news, they got the message. For the same reason they killed JFK. They were just sending a message, that's all. They were just sending a message. So I don't want to go too far down that. I'll post it, but they were sending a message, and I think that message is already out. And it's obviously out because nobody's talking about Julian Assange. They're trying to figure out who will be their new master in 2020, which master they love the most. Many would rather be on death row now than serve life in prison. Yeah, Lori, what I said, slavery's a choice. Many would just go, hey, we're going to die at the front door. You come to the front door, we're going to do the dying right there. We're going to do the dying on the property. We're going to do the dying on the sidewalk. We're not going to do no dying in no damn prison. Let alone be on trial by the world's criminals. Have the world's criminals give you a perp walk somewhere. Nah, hell no. Not me. Slavery is a choice. Kanye West said it best. Slavery is a choice. It was a cause, suicide by cop. That's what most people do. And that's what these young kids do. The kids who don't see any hope, that's what they're actually doing. It's suicide by police. And Assange is saying he would do the same thing, I guess. FYI, the Gospels of some of the other apostles were omitted from the good book for a reason. Yes, they were mistreated. Go and say the truth. In one of them, Christ murdered a child. What? Whoa, mystery. Pump your brakes, girl. What? Huh? Who? What? Huh? I read most of them. I'm saying most of them because the Dead Sea Scrolls, I don't think they even translate all that yet. I've never heard anything about Christ murdering a child. Christ had a wife in one of them. Jude in the book of Judas. Judas was the one who understood Christ, who went to India, and he was quietly, they had some sort of understanding that the rest of the apostles didn't have. The book of the Watchers, the aliens are watching us, the angels and the demons. The book of Enoch, he was abducted by aliens. It got all that. I didn't know. There's a book where Christ murdered a child. I need to see that. You gotta give me the name of that book. That one's hard for me to swallow. All right, it's hard to defend yourself from a cage with no access to the outside world. Exactly, and you can't say anything to the outside world without them knowing from within the cage. Susan, and on principle alone, I can't agree with anybody being in a cage. Well, I can't agree with the United States Incorporated putting anybody in a cage. Because there's nothing, name one thing that anybody in a cage created by the United States Incorporated that somebody's in that didn't do what the United States Incorporated does every day. Name one thing. I used to play this game on Facebook. It's like name one crime of anybody in mass incarceration that isn't something that they legislate and they do on a daily basis. And it's like nothing. Nothing. We rob, loot, kill, steal, rob, destroy, rape, blow up, embezzle money, enslave the citizens, blow up entire towns of people, but then we put one murderer on trial for murdering one person, and the public feels safer because we put one guy who accidentally murdered someone with a car that he was texting and driving. It's always so fun. What was that I saw yesterday? I wanted to show you. I'll post a link. You can watch the whole thing. I can't show the whole thing. Hillary Clinton was exposed via WikiLeaks. Yes, Lori, which is why the left hate Assange and they hate WikiLeaks. Which is fun, too, because now Hillary Clinton was proven to be lying about Russiagate. That's why I don't play anymore. Lori, I don't play politics no more because when you, again, the title, I'm a horrible team player for these reasons because I'm tired of y'all making me look stupid. Hillary Clinton is a criminal. The woman is a criminal. She lied to everybody. And you'd had half the country voted for her. Come to find out, she lied about Russiagate just to keep people from looking at her email server. We showed that on Ron Paul the other day. All right. No, I was gonna look for something else real quick. You don't ever do deals with criminals, crooks, thugs,
fines or fees to the
and
state.
Clintons.
Well, that creates a whole new host of problems, obviously, because
This is the U.S. workers appeal to the UN for help. I found this to be interesting. Here's another one.
Hey, Charles.
You know, how's it go? Nook and put nub in all the wrong places. Nook and put nub.
Greetings and salutations.
Not here to help you.
From dodging the hard questions to doubling down on American foreign policy exceptionalism, to the surprise appearance of Jeff Goldblum sitting comfortably on Mike Pence's head, the recent vice presidential debates between former California Attorney General Kamala Harris and current Vice President Mike Pence were a highlight reel of modern U.S. political discourse. A great example of this was seen in how the two candidates battled over whose political party has created or lost more U.S. jobs than the other.
In our first 3 years after...
Hold on, I like this. This is interesting to me. I always love hearing people debate about whose political party got rid of more forced labor, slavery, career thing called jobs than the other political party. Literally debating slavery. Who got rid of more forced labor positions being a bad thing? Slavery is a choice. Once again, slavery is a choice, and I don't think people think about things the same way. Man shall not work, man shall not eat, but man need to do his own work, and woman need to do her own work. Important work, not billionaires' work, not career work, not slavery, not being forced to work on a cotton gin because we refuse to let children be free and choose how they want to live their own lives. In a highly technological time where we know human beings don't have to be slaves to begin with.
After we cut taxes, roll back
That's
regulations,
why I didn't watch
unleashed
it.
American energy, this administration saw 500,000
Thank you, Vice
manufactured
President.
jobs created.
Joe Biden is responsible for saving America's auto industry, and you voted against it.
But in the age of COVID-19, it's not just about the creation of jobs here in America. It's also about keeping workers safe at those jobs.
You know you can 3D print a car, don't you? You know that, right? Do people know that here? You know you got metal 3D printers now? You know there's a child that actually 3D printed a Ferrari frame? You know that you can 3D print a car? Why in the hell do you want auto jobs? Why in the world do you want slavery? Why do you want people picking cotton still and you got a cotton gin? Somebody explain that to me. This is why I don't watch this stuff, because they don't debate it from a realistic perspective. They always have two contrived positions, and the only fight you get is the left side of the plantation or the right side of the plantation, not whether or not slavery should continue to exist, whether or not we should still attach debt to babies at birth to make them work for billionaires who won't even return their phone call if they ever call them, but they can't ever call them because they didn't have a phone number to call.
And according to a new complaint filed by the largest trade unions in the U.S., the United States government has been woefully and dangerously inadequate in workplace safety in this time of COVID-19. The Washington Post reports that the Service Employees International Union and the AFL-CIO has filed a complaint with the United Nations International Labor Organization in Geneva, charging that the U.S. government is violating workers' rights in terms not typically associated with well-off countries. At one point saying they bind many essential workers have been placed in during the pandemic, forced to risk infection or lose their jobs and potentially unemployment benefits, amounts to a system of forced labor. The Post goes on to note that some of the complaint's harshest accusations were over the Trump administration's executive orders declaring industries such as meatpacking essential, compelling them to stay open even amid potential novel coronavirus outbreaks, while federal agencies, including OSHA, declined to issue enforceable safety regulations. So with no help coming from our elected officials at home due to both the Democrat and Republican parties' fealty to corporate money, power, and influence, U.S. labor unions are now forced to look to the United Nations for help. Yes, my friends, it has come to that, which means it's time to start watching the Hawks.
If you want to know what's going on in your city, in your streets, you want to rise above the sheep, let me show you what you seek. See the uprisings, opioids, deep state on steroids, drone strikes, mass graves, war hawks and debt slaves, systemic deceptions, manipulate your mind, but the truth is our weapon, so
Hello?
Hi, is this Charles? Hey Charles, this is Lauren Trump calling from the Trump campaign.
Oh my gosh, how are you?
How are you? I'm doing great. Look, I just wanted to call you because I know we text and email you all the time for donations to the president and our campaign, and you've been so generous and you really have been such a great supporter of the president. I really wanted to call on behalf of our entire campaign, family, and the president and say thank you.
Oh, that is so sweet. You're more than welcome.
I know that we send you a lot. I know that they can be overwhelming. I hear from people all the time that I reach out a lot, but really it's people like you that are going to make the difference and make sure that Donald Trump wins in November and we get 4 more years. So really wanted to say thank you. We appreciate the support so much.
Why do we offer so many active safety features on our Chevy SUVs?
Oh, yeah.
Call us when you get there, okay?
open up your eyes.
Welcome everyone to Watching the Hawks. I am Tyrell Ventura.
And I'm Amisha Croft.
Amisha, it's incredible that our workers here in the United States have now got to go to international bodies, international organizations in order to try to hope to get some kind of rights back, hope to get some kind of workplace safety. That's mind-blowing.
Unfathomable in so many ways. For the past, 7 decades plus, we have been seen as a nation that continually progressed when it came to workers' rights. And it's just frustrating now that we're going to institutions for assistance that we usually argue on behalf of other places to go to when there are, major problems like this. And now we're finding ourselves in that exact same lurch. It says a lot about our leadership. It also says a lot about how demoralizing we're actually making everyday work for American citizens.
Richard Trumka, the president of the AFL-CIO, told the Washington Post, quote, "COVID has laid bare what we already knew. It has demonstrated that not only is the U.S. violating workers' rights, but those violations are resulting in people dying. It became so outrageous that we wanted to file the complaint." And when you look at the numbers, it is kind of frightening when you see these, you see them in this report when you lay it out, that you see complaints to OSHA, and then 17, 20 days later, you see a spike in coronavirus deaths. Now, that's enough correlation to say people were complaining, but then, now they're getting hit because no one stepped up. No one stepped up to say what will be workplace safety guidelines. Everything was kind of patchwork of whatever anybody could grab.
No, it absolutely was. And the other part is that if you worked in a factory or if you worked with machinery or if you did any of those types of industry level jobs, you were one of the last people to get PPE equipment. And, their families, everyone is hearing about how COVID-19 is ravaging, yet they still have to keep food on the table. So they're still going into work. And the devastation has just been quite severe. And these organizations have not paid any attention to the mandates of the state in many cases, nor, we have a lack of it at the federal level, but they have not been attentive to any of the science behind COVID-19 either. So they're risking a lot of potential workers.
It's when you say lack at the federal level, it's interesting because the first thing people think of when they think about workplace safety is OSHA, the Occupation Safety and Health Administration. Their job is to enforce workplace safeties. Workers can silently and anonymously say, hey, look, something at my job site's dangerous. Can you come in and inspect? But that's one of the major problems they're saying is the cause of this. That and the 1935 National Labor Relations Act, commonly referred to as the Wagner Act. That act is like so old, it now excludes farmers, contractors, gig workers, and other types of more precarious employees from any kind of labor protection rights here in this country. But getting to OSHA, researchers at Harvard, Boston Children's Hospital, and the Massachusetts Department of Public Health found that to date, the Federal Occupational Safety and Health Administration has not issued any emergency or permanent standards specific to COVID-19 exposure at the workplace. They have not issued any rulings as to how you're supposed to keep your workplace safe.
That's just insane.
Even worse, as of August 13th, 2020, OSHA has issued only 4 citations related to COVID-19. Moreover, the total number of federal OSHA inspections of any kind during 2020 has been reduced by 2/3 compared to the same period in prior years. They're inspecting less, and they've only found 4 instances in the entire country of a workplace not taking COVID seriously and putting their workers in danger?
Absolutely. And their initial, conversation about that was that they didn't want to expose their inspectors to COVID-19.
Yes.
So you're not going in because you don't want to expose your own people. Meanwhile, you're the organization that is supposed to provide the check and the balance for these corporations, for these entities that are doing things that they shouldn't for their employees.
And I hate to say it, but that is directly because of undue corporate influence on our politicians on the federal level. And both parties are guilty of this. You don't see many people going out saying, hey, we need more inspectors at OSHA. We're going to fight for this. OSHA's been gradually chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. Now the Trump administration's come in and kind of put that chipping away on overdrive. But I want to point this out, journalist David Sirota writes that ultimately what the GOP wants is an entire American workforce that is legally barred from suing employers, financially punished for refusing to return to unsafe workplaces, and unable to call the workplace cops when lives are put in danger. That's frightening because that is kind of the corporate idea. We're allowed up here to do whatever we want. You work for us. We pay you, so you are then obliged to do whatever we say.
Well, the GOP is treating workers like cogs in a wheel. They don't see them as human, and they are a means of manufacturing only. So this isn't surprising, but it is really frustrating because it also, it breaks the backs of unions as well, because the Trump administration and GOP has consistently tried to strip them of their rights as well. So that's typically the last stand for workers who really are trying to get their voices heard.
I hope that as we turn this, I hope that at some point when this country starts turning around, we start actually doing things to protect lives. Because I remember me and you sat at this desk back in the spring when they had that big push to get people back to work, saying, no, this is feeding people to the nightmare that is COVID. I wish people would step up and try to change this in the future. We'll keep our fingers crossed, but as long as corporations have their chokehold on Washington, I don't think that's going to happen.
I agree.
With every passing day, we get closer and closer to November 3rd. Yes, that fateful day when the United States of America chooses a new commander-in-chief. And in between now and then, one message is being heard all across the country, from Maine to San Diego, from politician to celebrity to social media influencer. And that message is to get out and vote. But in the age of COVID, gerrymandering, and, well, Donald Trump, several states have already reported voting issues that are creating new concerns ahead of our great election day. RT's Rachel Blevins joins us now with all of the gritty details. Thank you for coming on, Rachel. So, let's look at Florida. Florida's always one of those big swing states we talk about every election. What are the voting issues that we're seeing take place in Florida?
Well, if you look back at 2018, Florida was the state that passed this landmark legislation that would allow some convicted felons to vote. Now, at the time, they saw it as something that would help hundreds of thousands of residents who had served their time, hadn't been convicted of very dangerous crimes, and were still contributing to society. But even though the majority of the state was in favor of it, their new Republican governor was not. And so he launched this mission to really go against it and to gut those provisions and to add add new requirements to it. So now in 2020, we have them saying, well, convicted felons can vote as long as they don't owe any fines or fees to the state. Well, that creates a whole new host of problems, obviously, because you have an incentive to then get those people to vote in some ways and where you can even influence their vote. And then at the same time, you have felons who may not know exactly what fines they owe to the state, so they could actually get into even more trouble with the law if they do move forward with voting.
Wow.
And, you know, another topic that is on the minds of a lot of people across this country because of a lot of the conversation we've heard from President Trump and his acolytes is around mail-in voting and absentee ballots.
Yeah.
So what is new on that front? How do we weed through the fact versus the fiction?
Well, we've definitely seen a big push for that, especially at a time when they're trying to limit in-person gatherings. They're telling people, hey, vote early, send in your ballots, do all of that stuff as early as possible. Well, we've heard from voters in states like Ohio and New York saying that they requested absentee ballots, but then received either the wrong ballots altogether or the wrong form, the wrong address, that kind of thing. Now, those technicalities are extremely important because when we're talking about those ballots, we're looking at places where in the 2020 primaries alone, more than 500,000 ballots were rejected. And they can be rejected because your signature looked a little off, because you added a middle initial here on this form, but not on this form. It can be any number of things. So especially when we're looking at an election and wondering if it's going to be close, what it's going to look like, every vote counts. So those concerns that we're hearing now are especially important, that they're getting taken care of, getting them out of the way now as we approach Election Day.
I mean, it's only a few weeks away, but I think the biggest question is, given what you've been saying and what we've all been hearing about, get out and vote, vote early, get this done now, all of that is, how is early voting playing a role in this election? Where does that look like right now?
Well, so far they say that around 5.6 million votes have been cast in early voting in the 2020 election. That is far and above what we saw in 2016. And if we look back at 2016, we see an election where voter turnout was at a 20-year low. So over the last 4 years, you've really seen that message turned up. You've really seen, from whether it be celebrities, anytime you get on Facebook or Instagram, they're telling you, hey, register to vote, get out and vote. And we're also in a time where a lot of people already know exactly who they're voting for, and they know that ahead of the debates and all of that, so they're much more likely to try to make their voice heard and to hope that everything goes as planned and their ballot is accepted.
And do you think that how do you think this is going to play out on election night? We've heard that you might not get someone actually elected until weeks or a month later. With what you know about what's going on with the ballots and early voting, how do you think that's going to affect when America will know who the next president is?
Well, it certainly is going to have an impact, especially because you do have states saying that they're either going to count those ballots the day of after polls close, or maybe that they're even going to wait a few days. So especially when it comes to those very important battleground states that are literally looking at every single ballot, it is going to play a big role, and it's also going to play a big role to see how those two candidates handle it. You've got President Trump saying that he's already wary of all of these ballots. He's already concerned about this, and so it'll be interesting to see exactly how those days play out and how those candidates respond.
All right, Rachel, thank you so much for that update on all things voting here in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, as we go to break, remember that you can also start watching Hawks on demand through the brand new portable TV app, which is available on all platforms. Definitely go check it out. Coming up, we are joined by author and pastor Daniel Hill to discuss the history and future of Christianity and racism in the United States of America. Definitely going to be a fascinating conversation, so stay tuned to Watching the Hawks.
Racism, white supremacy, and a system of government that views race before personhood isn't anything new to America. In fact, it's what this country was founded on. From the early explorers who pilfered land owned by Native Americans and brutalized them, to the country's treatment of blacks and Latinos. America seems to function on racial bias and exclusion. But for Black America, there is a particularly nasty and pervasive level of abuse, domestic terrorism, legal discrimination, and Olympic-level hurdles institutional racism and white supremacy present in the United States. Slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, the prison industrial complex, a subpar education system, lax health care, housing equity, you name it. And somehow this country has created a nearly impenetrable system of racism designed to keep Blacks from progressing. And in a nation that speaks so heavily of its Christian leanings, its devotion to biblical principles, and touts faith often, the actions of whites against their Black counterparts don't exactly mirror Jesus' teachings. Does the white church deny there is a race problem? Are these churches complicit? Why do their faith leaders stand on the sidelines? A new book titled White Lies: 9 Ways to Expose and Resist the Racial Systems That Divide Us moves to answer those questions and more. Author and pastor Daniel Hill takes a deep dive into the cultural and historical trails of racism in America. He not only defines white supremacy and gives real-world context, but also speaks to the ideology that makes it so hard to root out, and gives steps specifically for the church on the work they have to do in teaching equity, standing with Black people, and making America live up to its ideals. Hill is a racial equity advocate, pastor of River City Church, a multi-ethnic congregation in Chicago, and is on a mission to lead church leaders beyond the racism deeply embedded in the white evangelical church. Daniel Hill joins us now to discuss his book that takes on white supremacy through a biblical lens. Welcome, Daniel.
Hey, Amisha.
So you and I go way back. We're both Chicago people. I know of your church quite a bit. You're someone who leads this massive multicultural church in what is it is America's most segregated city, Chicago. You've seen front and center the results of community divestment, a biased criminal justice system, the results of redlining. How are these things addressed in your church? And how does your congregation live out the examples that you set out in your book?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think you've heard the analogy, right, of if there's babies coming down the stream of a river and you try to help the babies who are coming down, but at some point you have to go upstream to figure out why the babies are ending up in the water in the first place. I would say that describes the full range, right? A lot of what we're trying to do as a church is just try to support folks who are trying to navigate what you call those Olympic-sized hurdles and, trying to walk with folks as they do that. But then at the same time, we're trying to take a deeper look at the foundations, at the roots of what has led to these racial disparities in the first place, and to really equip people to be truth tellers that can really uproot the ideology of white supremacy from everywhere that it lives.
It's interesting, I want to ask you this because it comes up a lot, especially now with the election and all of that, and you see a lot of evangelical white churches and church members or politicians that belong to that, talking about their connection with God and Jesus and all that. But historically speaking, white evangelical churches have not had the greatest of records when it comes to race relations in this country. They upheld slavery, they backed Jim Crow, they back egregious and unjust sentencing at times, and they constantly have ignored the rights of Black people throughout, up until now in present day. Do you think there is hope for those white evangelical churches who have this nasty history? Is there hope for them to get better when it comes to racism in this country?
Yeah, well, I agree with you on all those things you said, and despite the toxic reputation that comes with that word evangelical, I'm one of them. I'm a white evangelical pastor, and so I see firsthand all that. I think there are many of us who grieve deeply that that's both our history and our current reality. But there are those of us who have seen the kind of profound sin both historically and in present times, and are doing our best to name that and repent of it and confess of it and lead our people into a different direction. And so I have to hope that's the very core of my faith, is that no matter how big of a sinner you are, you can find redemption. And so that's my hope for those of us in the white evangelical community as well.
And Daniel, in your book, you try to, and you talk about this recognition of evil. I think that's a big thing in the Christian church in general. All the evils of the world that you're supposed to be fighting against, that's your role as a Christian. But the evangelical church has largely not made any noise about societal problems of white supremacy or recognizing that as an essential evil. Why do you think it's so important right now in this nation's, at this point in this nation's history? And what advice would you give church leaders who are grappling with how to speak to their congregation on this touchy issue?
Yeah, when I'm with white pastors who are doing this work, I remind them that we have to take a historical viewpoint of it. And the reality is, Christianity in America is really unique as opposed to other places because it's part of our origin story. White supremacy and Christianity grew up together here in the United States. And so this isn't new for white Christians to be turning a blind eye towards white supremacy. As you did that powerful introduction, we had to learn how to look the other way during colonialism and genocide. We had to look the other way as slavery became kind of the norm for building our economy. And so it's ingrained into our system of coming to believe deeply in Jesus and somehow learning to look the other way when it comes to black suffering. And so I don't think that's a representation of Jesus at all. I think a clear view of Jesus demands that we tell the truth and deal with this. But unfortunately, white Christians have learned how to coexist where they think about personal faith and somehow are able to turn a blind eye to black suffering.
Is that hard? Do you find that hard, and do you find that, you know, pretty rampant in the evangelical or in the white evangelical community, where it's just where they kind of is that hypocrisy? Is how rampant is that in your adventures and kind of dealing with this?
Where I think it's rampant, you know, I think in every circle we are all having to deal with kind of some of the brainwashing that comes with white supremacy. And so I think in white Christian circles, particularly in evangelical and more conservative spaces, there's been this kind of, I would almost call it a propaganda that has treated things like racism and white supremacy, the Black Lives Matter, stuff like that. They've labeled it as kind of leftist social movements that aren't directly relevant to their faith. And so once a white Christian comes to believe that, they just stop thinking about it. And so the best of evangelicalism as I've grown up in it is that there's this view that God is beautiful and loving and has revealed God's self through the Bible and through the person of Jesus, and that when we follow him is when, you know, we're most alive and when we're loving our neighbor.
That was the story of the day.
We didn't get access. What was the judge like?
This judge threw out Vanessa Baraitser. She declared against the defense so many times. She imposed a guillotine of half an hour on the on defense witnesses' statement, and she gave up to 4 hours to the prosecution for their cross-examination. Now, I know cross-examination usually gets more time, but the disparity between the two is absolutely grotesque.
Well, obviously the Crown Prosecution Service will deny all of that. John Pilger, I'll stop you there. More from one of the world's greatest journalists after this short break. Welcome back. I'm still here with journalist, filmmaker, and friend of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, John Pilger. The Guardian newspaper was referred to time and time again as
particularly two members, Luke Harding and David Lee. David Lee, who was entrusted the secret password to some of the WikiLeaks files and published it. And they published it in their book.
But yet the Guardian has been saying that Julian Assange, or at least printing stories about Julian Assange being the problem because he didn't redact data from WikiLeaks cables that were released, thus endangering people around the world.
Excuse me for interrupting, but what has come through, perhaps more powerfully than anything, is that Assange went out of his way to protect informants, to redact. Daniel Ellsberg said he redacted 15,000 files. The distinguished investigative journalist Nikki Hager, who worked with Assange on this, watched him taking the most extraordinary precautions with the material.
People thought Assange was paranoid for wanting to redact so much.
I would suggest those who didn't redact perhaps are on the other side, certainly not on Assange's side. I've known for years the extent to which Julian Assange went to redact and tried to redact and worked through the night to redact and couldn't and wasn't allowed to. So much of this has come out in court and ought to have been reported.
But why would The Guardian not be reporting about The Guardian at the Old Bailey on its front page?
Well, perhaps The Guardian has something to hide. or even something to fear.
And do you think there are many people at many publications that feel this way? I mean,
this is who.
No one is telling The Guardian directly, do not cover the Assange.
Look, I don't really want to concentrate. The Guardian's behaviour through all this, its campaign of vilification against Assange, the way they turned on their source, the way because he wouldn't be part of their collusive club, has been a disgrace. They know it's been a disgrace. The way they published articles like the one that said that Trump advisor Paul Manafort and Russians visited Assange. It never happened. There's been no apology from The Guardian. I think it's not just The Guardian. There are many other newspapers that have found, some actually have behaved rather honourably, I think. I think it was good to hear from the investigative reporter John Gertz, who was the investigations editor, I think, of Der Spiegel in Germany. He spoke very clearly. He also refuted a story that Assange, which is in the Harding Lee book, that Assange had said that it was quite a good thing that some of these informants were harmed. Gertz, Harding and Lee were not at this dinner at which Assange was meant to have said this, but John Gertz was. And he said, Assange said nothing of the kind. Now, Judge Baraitser wouldn't allow Gertz to actually utter those words in court. She cut him off.
Because of time?
Well, because I think the reason, perhaps I stand corrected, but I think the reason was that these words actually weren't in his written statement, but he was telling the truth.
Well, we invite Harding and the editor of The Guardian on to explain its behaviour. I'm sure they'll deny completely any secret agenda. It has to be said that Joe Biden, the Democrat contender for the presidency of the United States, says that Julian Assange was like a high-tech terrorist.
He called him a cyber terrorist, yes. Well, what would you expect? I mean, Trump, Biden.
I mean, Trump is on the record for saying he doesn't know anything about WikiLeaks. It's not my thing. I know there is something having to do with Julian Assange.
Who knows what Trump knows about? Who knows what he says is true that minute and it changes the next? I do know that what came out very clearly from these few days, these few weeks in court, was that Assange was on trial for journalism, and that many other journalists have done exactly what he did, and that is publish the Iraq and Afghanistan war diaries. One website published it well before even WikiLeaks. The Guardian published them.
The prosecution said
New York Times
the prosecution said WikiLeaks has more reach, even if WikiLeaks published them later.
But they all published the same thing, and the 1917 Espionage Act, 103 years ago, which has never been used against a journalist, because in the United States, the journalist and free journalism is meant to be protected by the Constitution. This is the first time it's been used, the first time. And in my view, if they get away with this, if they send Assange across the Atlantic, it won't be the last time. It will be the beginning. Who will be next?
You did detect, somewhat hopefully, some kind of change in the last 2 days of this 4-week hearing at the Old Bailey. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
My sense was that British justice has been so trashed by this trial and all the so-called case management proceedings before it, that an innocent man, a man whose only crime has been bail infringement, for which he received an unheard of sentence of almost a year in a maximum security prison with murderers and convicted terrorists. My sense is they may feel it's gone a bit too far, because everyone going into that court, lawyers, those of us who've been in many courts around the world, can no longer put the two words British and justice together. There hasn't been due process in this court, there has been due revenge. Now, certainly in the last few days, there has appeared to be a loosening up, allowing of, for instance, the defense and prosecution are allowed a whole month to make their closing statements, but still they can't argue them in court. They can only make them on paper. And Judge Baraitser will give her decision on the 4th of January, I understand. But the whole dreadful drama and the arguing against the what Professor Niels Melzer, the UN reporter on torture, has called arguing against the very fact, the obvious fact, of the psychological torture of this journalist and publisher who told us about war crimes. He told us about war crimes. He told us about how governments lies. That's journalism has been recast, literally, as espionage. Not espionage in the country you come from, or even the country you publish from, this country, but in another country, the United States. What has gone is sovereignty. That American jurisdiction can cross any ocean and reach into any country, any journalist. Just imagine it, reverse it. China doing that. China with its own equivalent Assange case. Russia. Can you imagine the outrage? It would never happen.
I mean, obviously...
Never is such a big word. Never is a big word. Sovereignty. What another good word. If you ever find yourself in a time where the global biggest militaries, governments, superpowers all can be brought to their knees and told exactly what to do to destroy your economies, your nation is not sovereign. If you do not control your currency, your nation is not sovereign. It doesn't really matter what nation the order comes from. The stance is for a global empire, and it's not owned by America. Roth America is a solely owned subsidiary of at least 13 families. Some people say 200. Industries, families, and banks own countries. That's why I don't play the game anymore. I have no interest in the American game. I have no interest because it's all an illusion. George Carlin had it correct. Sorry about the race stuff. It's important to know what people are thinking. Oh God, that was horrible. That was horrible. But I did find it interesting that he mentioned propaganda within that. You know, the only supremacy you need to be worried about is bank supremacy, 0.01% supremacy, the people who own the plantation. Going after the people who hold the whips, going after the people who have better jobs than you on the plantation will do nothing for your freedom. Go after the plantation. It's the system that needs to fall. Ignore those who are also abused by the system. They're going to get looted with you. All right, new comments on the roll. Have I read the article about the proposed vaccines for the COVID, requiring the kill of 10,000 sharks? Ooh, no, I have not. Thank you for that mystery. That's another. It's requiring the kill of Africans. It's requiring the kill of anybody who's going to be silly enough to go and get it. Version 1.0. These companies have indemnity. You can't sue them. Getting that is a very bad idea. Why is this narrative so important where America is made up of so many non-white folks? Well, drummer boy, it's because it's to control people. They'll control people any way they can. And usually the emotional means is the best means. And that usually tends to be race, religion, national pride, anything that's an illusion. We are a slave plantation and we are controlled by emotions, which is why I call the elections the emolections. That's what they are. It's just all emotion. You know, you can enslave people if you can keep them emotional. And I chase people away when I post stuff on race, but every now and then you got to take a look at it and kind of see where things are, where people's minds are, and they're still there. I'll put it another way. If there's steak on the table, don't argue with people with chicken bones on the floor. Right? Steak is on the table. The banks own the steak. They enslaved you. They got all the good food up there. When chicken bones fall to the ground, do not scrap over the chicken bones. That's when you take out the table legs, you take out the Democrats, Republicans, the races, the religions, the illusions that hold that table up, that keep those billionaires on top of everybody. You take out the plantation. Focus on the system. Ignore anyone else who is oppressed by that system. I read some of the comments. Banks own the stank too. Yes, they do. Well, bankers own all the stank all over the world. The world stank is funky, and we need to clean it up. Kids don't need to grow up with this decaying state humanity is in, looting and burning a planet that does not have to be. Anyway, I gotta get going. All right, this is Gerard. Y'all have a wonderful day. I'll post the links. You can watch the rest of it. Have a wonderful